All right, so we started talking about some of the features of your graphing calculator and things that you can do with it. We went over some of the basics and we had just started talking about how some of the graphing works. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is I really want to show you how this graphing works. Now, I suggest that as you watch this video, you have your graphing calculator with you and you kind of do these things along with me. The more that you practice hitting the right buttons, the easier it's going to get for you, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to use this equation right here, and we're going to take a look at the graph of this thing, okay? So this is where I'm going to enter the equation. Just as a reminder, how do you get there? Well, when you turn your calculator on, you're probably going to be on your home screen like this. It's fine if there's stuff typed in there. It doesn't really make a difference. You're going to come up here and push this y equals button, okay? So y equals. If there's anything in here, you're going to have to clear it out. If this is a brand new calculator, then you probably don't have anything in here, but if you got it from secondhand somewhere, or if it was a sibling's, you might just have to clear some stuff out. No big deal, okay? Now, if you do have an old or a used calculator, make sure that up here, all these plots are nice and light like this, okay? So if you look at yours, and yours looks like that, where one or more of these plots is darkened, you're going to need to turn that off or it's not going to work correctly, okay? We'll talk about how to use those later. But all you're going to do is just use the up arrow right here, go up to where it says whatever plot that is on, hit the enter key, and then it'll switch off, okay? So they should all be lightly colored like that. Okay, great. So we are going to enter this equation. Now it says y1 equals, that's like our y equals, and the one just stands for, it's the first equation. So first equation, second equation, third equation, and so on. So I'm just going to type this in. So 3 parentheses x. Now to use any kind of a variable, you always use this xt theta n button right next to the alpha button. So there's my x, minus 15, close my parentheses, squared, and then plus 10. So here's my graph, okay? Now, if we just go to graph this, nothing shows up. Well, why doesn't anything show up? Well, because if we take a look at what we know about this graph, I know that this graph has been shifted to the right 15 and up 10. So right now, my graph is set at 10 by 10. This is negative 10, that's positive 10, negative 10, positive 10. So if my graph has been shifted over here, 15, and then up 10, it's the vertex is somewhere up here, right? And then it's opening up here. So that's why I can't see anything, it's just off of my graph screen. So we need to adjust our window so that we're gonna be able to see this graph, okay? Now there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. First of all, we have this window button right here, okay? So there's the window button and then the zoom button next to it. Now, you are going to be tempted to try to use the zoom button for everything, and I'm going to warn you now, it doesn't always work, okay? So when you go into zoom, you got Z box, okay? All that basically does, actually, you know what? I can't remember what that does. I was thinking I knew what it did, but that's what Z square does. I don't actually know what ZBox does. I don't think I've ever used it in my life. So that gives you an idea of how often you're probably going to use that one. Zoom in and zoom out are pretty explanatory. I honestly don't think I've ever used zoom decimal. Zoom square. So what that does is that if you kind of look at your screen here, so even though this is 10 by 10, because this screen isn't a square, you can see how the little hash marks are a little bit wider between these guys than they are between those guys. And that can cause some distortion. Like if we were to graph a circle, it's not going to show up looking like a circle because it's stretched out a little bit. So what Z square does is it just makes it so that your view screen, now see how the little tick marks are equally distant? So it's not 10 by 10 anymore. It's adjusted this to fit the window. Okay, so that's all that does. Okay, number 6, zoom standard. Z standard will always take you back to this 10 by 10 grid. Okay, so that's one that I use very, very often. I almost always use Z standard. Okay, all right, Z trig, that's for trigonometry, Z integer, Z zoom stat. So down at the bottom, there are 2 different things that you should be aware of. Zoom stat is something that you're going to use if you're ever making graphs like a histogram or a bar graph or a scatter plot. Okay, you might use that. And then this last guy, zoom fit. Okay, so what zoom fit is it's basically that your calculator takes a guess at what a good viewing window is. Okay, so your calculator is going to guess, And here's the thing, you are going to be tempted to try to use Zoom Fit for everything. If that is the only thing that you are relying on, you are going to be losing major points on tests and quizzes when you're assessed on your windows. Okay, so let's try it. We're going to use Zoom Fit. Okay, and here's what this window ends up looking like. Now, I know that this is supposed to be a parabola. I don't see a parabola here. I see like half of a parabola. Okay, so this Zoom Fit, it gave it a good guess and it said, this is what I think you want to see. But is this a great viewing window? No, it doesn't even look like a parabola. Okay, so this isn't going to be a great option for us. Okay, so we've got all these different Zooms. I'm going to go back to Zoom Standard. You don't have to do this, but just to kind of show you one more thing. So I want option 6, which is Zoom Standard. You have two options. You can come down here to 6 and hit enter, or when you're up at the top, you can just push the button for the number 6. So like if I just push the number 6, it's going to take that option for me. All right. We still can't see anything because again, the graph is somewhere up here, right? So here's where your window button comes in. The window button comes in because I can set what do I want my X values and Y values to be for this particular graph. So the X min and X max tell you how wide this way you are. The Y min and the Y max tell you how tall you're going. X scale and Y scale just tells you how far apart your tick marks are. So are you counting by 1s or 2s or 5s or 10s or whatever. Okay, and then the X res, it has to do with the resolution of the screen. Don't worry about that one. Okay, so we said on this guy, right, that I know based on looking at this graph, right, that my vertex moved over 15 and up 10, right? So this is over here at 15, 10. And my graph kind of comes up like this, right? So knowing that, that's going to help me set my window. So when I'm looking at my window, I don't want to go from -10. My graph's way over here. Okay, now I do want to go a decent amount on each side. So I'm going to say, let's go from like +5. So I'm going to go on the X scale from about +5, which would be over here, to, how about 25? So I'm going 10 in each direction. So my X min and X max, I'm just going to leave my X scales. I honestly almost never change those. And then for the Ys, I don't want to start way down here at -10. I can't see my graph. If my graph starts up here at 10, I'm going to say, well, let's go 10 in each direction again. So I'm going to go from 0, which would be 10 below my vertex, up to 20. Okay, so I used what I know about the graph to give a good estimate of what my viewing window should be. Okay, and now when I hit the graph button up here, there's my parabola. Okay, so that is kind of the point of what we're doing here, okay? So what you want to kind of do when you're using your window, it's not blind guessing. You look at your graph and you try to make some good estimates, okay? If we had gone from that Zoom Fit, you can also use Zoom Fit as like a starting point. If I was looking at this, see, now notice that we got a different graph than what we had before, right? You could look at this and then say, okay, well, from what I have now, when I look at the window, this is what the window's doing. It's going to a Y max of 310. Gee, that seems like a lot. And then you could adjust it from there. Okay. So I'm going to go, let's see. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it here for right now. Okay. So let's take a look at this graph. And we are going to use this to find some different things. So there's a lot of cool features you can do once you have a graph. All right. So the first things that you can do is you can use this trace button. Okay, so trace button is what you use anytime you know an X value and you want to know the Y value. Okay, so if I asked you when X is 25, what is Y? Okay, that's what we would use this trace feature for. So here's what you do. You push the trace button, okay, and you're going to notice two things happen. One, you're going to see up here that you've got the equation of the graph. And down here, it gives you the coordinates of a point, and you can sort of see, it's sort of behind my screen a little bit, but there's a little flashy, I call it a spider there. I'm going to push my over buttons so that it'll move. I call that a spider. Okay, so this is my little spider guy. And this is just telling you, as you can see, the coordinates of the point change. So it's telling you where you are in the graph. So it's giving you the coordinates of just points on the graph. And you have to push left and right. You can move side to side on your graph. Pushing up and down isn't going to cause anything to happen because I only have one equation in. What the up and down buttons do is they switch between graphs. So we just put one equation in Y1 back here. So if I put more equations in for Y2, Y3, Y4, then using those up and down buttons while you're in trace mode will let you switch between them. Okay, so I'm going back to my graph. I'm hitting The trace turned off, right? See how all those numbers went away? So I'm hitting trace again. And the nice thing about this is that it lets you enter in your own number. So like if I want to know when X is 8, okay, well, I'm at 7.9. And if I try to go over closer to the 8, it jumps me up to 819, right? So trying to get that exact value is a little bit tricky. But what you can do is as long as you're in trace mode, you can type whatever number you want. So I'm going to type 8. And you're going to see it says X equals 8 there. Okay, and then when I hit enter, it's going to jump me right to that point. So for an X value of 8, the Y value is 157. Okay, so it's the trace button again, and you can just type whatever number you want. So if I type in 10, 10 goes with 85. If I type in 20, I get 85. Okay, because parabola is symmetrical, right? Now, the only limitation that you're going to find on here is that our window, the highest X value we have is 25. Well, when I go to graph this, if I use my trace feature and I enter a number larger than that, you're not going to be able to do it. It's going to give you an error. Okay, so you have to enter X values that are visible on the screen. Weirdly enough, the Y values don't matter at all. Okay, so like if I plug in, say, let's see, 12. Okay, so if I plug in, not 12, 6. There we go. All right, so if I plug in a Y value of 6, I get 253, right? If I were to trim this Y scale down to just say 250, so now I'm not going to be able to see that point up here. But for whatever reason, when I hit trace and I put in that 6 again, even though it's off the screen, it'll still give it to me. So the X value has to be visible, but the Y value, it doesn't really matter. Go figure. Okay, so that's the first one, your trace feature. Now, there's also a way to do that if you go into the calculate menu. So see above trace, it says calc, and it's the matching color to your second button. So if I do second and the trace button, you can also use option 1 value. And if you choose that, then it jumps you down to where you can type in the X value. But honestly, I don't know why you do that. It's extra buttons to push. Okay, so I can just type in the 6 and hit enter, and it'll give me the same thing I did before. But like, why do that? All you have to do is push the trace button and type the 6 and hit enter. So that's an option, but it's kind of dumb. Okay, but I do want to talk about that calc menu. So second trace. Okay, and we've got a whole bunch of different options here. Zeros, those are your X intercepts. Okay, so that's going to be an important thing to find. Minimum or maximum, so that's how you'd find your vertex. Intersect is when you have two graphs and you want to know where they cross each other. 6 and 7, those are derivatives and integrals. That's something you're going to use in calculus, but we won't cover in this class. Okay, and those are all your options for your calculations. So we're going to take a look at some of these and see kind of how they work. Okay, so first I want to just change to a different graph. So I want to make something that's a little bit more graph friendly. So let's change this to, let's see. I want to make this a little smaller. So I'm going to make this just a 5. So I'm going to use my delete key to delete just the 1. If you hit the clear button, it'll clear everything out. I don't want to retype the whole thing. So I just use delete to change that 1 number. And then over here, instead of making this plus 10, how about we make it minus 8? So I'm going to overwrite the minus 8 and then just delete that 0 at the end. Okay, so this is going to give us a different graph. I'm going to go back to zoom standard. So zoom and then option 6 standard. Because I kind of planned this so that my vertex would be somewhere nice and visible. Okay. You know what? I'm going to actually go back in and delete that 3 at the front. I just want to be able to see the y-intercept. All right. Hang on. I'm going to make you change this around a little bit. I thought that I had a good graph. There we go. Okay, so we'll do that. All right, so 0.5 at the beginning. So I use second and then insert above the delete key so that I could put in that 0.5. Sorry, that was a bunch of changing my mind about what I wanted the graph to look like. Okay, so here's what my graph looks like, and we're going to find these key features of the graph. So the first one is our zeros. So our zeros, again, are the same thing as your x-intercepts. We call those zeros because that's where the y value is 0. Okay, so where the y value is 0, those are our two x-intercepts. So we want to find those 2 points. So I'm going to go to second and calculate, choose option 2, which is 0. And then it's going to ask you some questions down here. There's going to be 3 questions: left bound, right bound, and a guess. Okay, so all that you have to do is that if we are looking for this little point right here, so I'm looking for this point, You have to just move your spider somewhere on the left side of that point and hit enter. Okay, so here's like the boundary line where my point is. So anywhere on the left side of this, my spider's already on the left side of it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hit enter. Now it's gonna ask me for a right bound. So again, I'm looking at this point and I need anywhere to the right of this. So anywhere on this visible part of the graph will be fine. Generally speaking though, you wanna try to avoid going past another intercept if you can. Okay, so I'm gonna use my left, right arrows to just move my little spider over. And now see how I'm on the right side? So whether you're above or below doesn't matter. It's left and right that matters. Okay, so now I'm on the right side of that intercept. I'm gonna hit enter. And then it's gonna ask you for a guess. Your guess does not need to be super accurate. Just get somewhat close, right? Like I could get a little closer than I am now. It doesn't really matter. As long as you're somewhat vaguely in the vicinity of it, you're good. Okay, and then I'm gonna hit enter and it's gonna jump me right to that 0. So my x-intercept here is a 0.10. Okay, so now let's do that again for this guy over here. So I'm gonna do second, calculate. I want option 2, 0. So again, you could either go down to it and hit enter or just type the number 2. It does the same thing. All right, and it's gonna ask me for a left bound. So now we're talking about this guy over here, right? So I've gotta be anywhere on the left of this. I just wanna kind of get away from this 0 a little bit. So I'm gonna use my arrow key to just move over a little bit more. Again, it doesn't need to be super accurate. There we go. Hit enter. All right, now I need to be on the right of it. So here's my point. So I need to be somewhere in this little chunk over there. Okay, if I go too far, my spider, it doesn't disappear off the screen. That's interesting. All right. It does if you're not in 0 mode. So I thought it would here, but it doesn't. All right, so I just went over to the edge, I hit enter, and now a guess. So again, just anywhere relatively close, does not have to be super accurate. Hit enter again. There's my other 0, 9, 0. Okay, so that's how you're gonna find your zeros or your x-intercepts. All right, now we want a minimum or a maximum, AKA your vertex. So the first thing you have to do, and you just have to do this, is decide, is this a minimum or is it a maximum? And hopefully it's pretty obviously the minimum because it's the smallest point, right? It's the lowest y value. So this guy is your minimum. So I'm gonna go second calc. We wanna find a minimum, option 3. Okay, it's gonna ask you those same 3 questions, left, right, and guess. So my vertex is down here. I need to be on the left of that. So I'm gonna slide over here, go on the left, slide over here, go on the right. And then my guess, again, just somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be super accurate. All right, now here's my minimum. Okay, now this is actually, I'm really glad this happened. You may have this number on your calculator, or you might just have the number 5. Remember how we said when we were looking at the window, how there's that XRes button, right? Where it's talking about the resolution of the screen. That's basically what's happening here. This is the number 5. It's just whole number 5. It's not 5 and a little tiny bit. It's just 5. But what's happening is that there's a pixelation issue on the screen, and you just get these little errors sometimes. Okay, so the 2 little errors that will sometimes pop up is you'll have something like this where it'll be 5.00001. Okay, that is just a calculator glitch. It's just the number 5. Okay, the other thing that might happen is you might get something like 4.9999999. Again, it's just a calculator glitch. It's the number 5. Okay, and we can test that because if I just go to my trace button and type in the number 5, you can see that I get that same -8 value. Okay, so that is my vertex 5, -8. You just sometimes get those little tiny glitches. Don't stress about it. It just happens sometimes and doesn't happen other times. Okay, so that's how you're gonna find your minimum or your maximum. If it was a maximum instead of a minimum, you would do the exact same steps. Okay, so one more thing we gotta talk about, and that is the, 2 more things, sorry. I wanna do the y-intercept and then also the intersection of 2 graphs. Now the y-intercept is actually super easy. You're gonna notice there's no option for that in here. There's an intersect, but not an intercept. Okay, well that's because if you think about it, what's true about all y-intercepts? They always have an x-coordinate of 0, right? Well, I know how to handle that. I push my trace button, type in an x value of 0. There's my y-intercept, 4.5. Okay? All right, great. So now we've got one more thing that we need to do here. So we talked about, okay, well, if I want to know when x equals whatever, how do I figure that out? What if you want to know a y value? So what if I want to know when y is -3, what's this graph worth? Okay, well, I can use my trace feature and like try to go over here and try to figure out where's -3. But we run into that issue again where I can get kind of close, but not perfect. So here's how you're going to handle that. Go back into y equals. And we're going to make a second equation, okay, which is the line y equals -3. Okay, because that's the value I just picked a number. I just want to find out when y is -3, what x value is this? Okay, so let's take a look at our graph. There's my horizontal line. Those are all the points of the y coordinate of -3. And the nice thing about this is that now these 2 points right here are going to be the 2 points with y coordinates of -3, right? Where they cross each other. So now what I can do is I can go back to my calc menu and find the intersection of these two lines. So I'm going to use option 5. And it's going to ask me 3 questions, very similar. First curve, second curve, and a guess. Okay, so first curve, second curve is basically just asking you, what 2 graphs do you want to find the crossing of? Now, we only have 2, so by default, it's going to choose the 2 graphs for us. But if back in y equals we'd had, say, 10 equations in there, then you'd need to specify which ones you're trying to find the intersection of. Okay, so first curve, second curve, I'm just going to hit enter. Notice that right now I'm on that parabola. When I hit enter, now it automatically switches me to my line. I'm going to hit enter again. It doesn't matter where you are. You just need to identify which 2 lines you're talking about. And then for your guess, get somewhat close, okay? It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, there's my intersection. So at an x value of about 1.8, my y value is at -3. All right, now let's do this one. So second calculate, I want the intersection, option 5. First curve, second curve, I'm just going to hit enter twice because I only have 2 graphs. Okay, and then for my guess, here's what I'm talking about when I say you don't have to get accurate. That's close enough. All your guess is doing is it's saying, well, there's 2 intercepts here. Which one do you want? Okay, and you just want to be close enough to whichever one you're looking for. If you're not close enough, it might jump you to this guy instead. I don't want that guy. I want this guy over here. So that right there, that's going to be close enough because it's closer to this guy than it is to that guy. And look, it jumped my spider to the right place. Always just make sure your spider looks like it's in the right place and you should be good to go. So there's my other spot where I have a y coordinate of -3. Okay, so again, quick recap. Trace value, when you know the x value and you want to find the y value, okay, and you would use that for things like your y-intercept as well. Okay, use the calc menu to find a 0. Those are your x-intercepts. Okay, find a minimum or a maximum, which in this case is going to be your vertex in a parabola. And then find the intersection of 2 graphs. Okay, this is going to be when you know what y is. So you know the y value and you want the x value. Okay, so those are kind of your basic graph features, right? Now, I know that there's a lot to these calculators and it can be really overwhelming at first. By the end of the year, you're going to be like secondhand with this stuff, no big deal, but you are going to need to practice a little bit just learning how to do it.